Hello and welcome to Deep Six Wrestling's Glorious or Rotten. I am your host, the glorious Robbie Rotten, aka the Glorious One, aka Mr. Money in the Bank. This episode is going to focus on WrestleMania VI, which took place on April 6th, 1990, from the Sky Dome in Toronto, Canada. And this is the first ever international WrestleMania. This is also the first WrestleMania that took place while I was actually alive. I just dated myself a little bit, but yes, I was alive for WrestleMania 6. And Robert Goulet started out by singing the Canadian national anthem, which is a bit of a difference from the first few, but obviously it makes sense. They're in Canada. That's what they want to hear there. So yeah, it was fine. He sounded pretty good. A little different, but he sounded pretty good. Match number one, we have Coco Beware versus Rick the Model Martel. And what a difference a year makes for Rick Martel. Now he's got this arrogant model character. He's got his own like cologne or perfume that he comes out and sprays. I think it's actually called Arrogance. And the ring carts are back this year. I guess this arena is, is a baseball stadium. I believe the Blue Jays still play there. So they have the carts back, and I just think the carts are so funny. So it's great. This is pretty solid opening match. It was well paced. Good action going on from both guys here, especially Rick Martel, who was really good. So Martel actually gets the win with a Boston Crab, and yeah, this is a good solid opener for WrestleMania. Can't complain here. Next up, we have the WWF Tag Team Championship match between the Colossal Connection, which is Andre the Giant and Haku with Bobby the Brain Heenan, versus Demolition Axe and Smash. And the crowd goes absolutely nuts when they hear, "This is the Axe, and here comes the Smasher." What an 80s, 90s, late 80s, early 90s theme song. So great. And yeah, they get a really big pop here. The crowd's really excited for them. This is their third consecutive WrestleMania in a WWF Tag Team title match, which is pretty impressive. They were always really hot back then, so good for them. This was a pretty solid match. I can't really complain much. Demolition gets the win when Andre gets kind of wrapped up in the ropes, and they hit their tag team finisher on Haku, and they win the tag team championships yet again. And actually, after the match was kind of cool because Andre had been a heel for a long time with Bobby Heenan, so Heenan is arguing with Andre and slaps him in the face, and then Andre actually attacks Heenan and leaves without Heenan and Haku, thus turning babyface again and getting a huge reaction. This actually was Andre's last WWF match, and it's kind of crazy to see because he was such a staple at all the early WrestleManias and just in the early version of the WWF, so this is like a closing of the door on him. So it was pretty solid. Next up, we had Hercules versus Earthquake with Jimmy Hart. And they're really making a big deal out of Earthquake here. I can't really say much about this match. It wasn't very good. It wasn't very long. Earthquake gets the win with a running splash on Hercules. And then it hits another one after the match. And yeah, I don't really have anything good to say about this, so I'm going to give this a rotten. I didn't really enjoy this too much. Meh. Next up, we had Mr. Perfect with the genius Lanny Poffo, who is Macho Man Randy Savage's brother, actually, versus Brutus the Barber Beefcake. And, this is another solid match. Mr. Perfect sells so well. He's such a good wrestler. And he actually surprisingly takes the loss here when Brutus hits a slingshot in the corner and then pins Perfect 1, 2, 3. And then he puts Poffo in a sleeper after and cuts his hair. So it was kind of funny. And this was really solid, decent stuff again. Nothing really special, but pretty solid. So that's all I'm going to say about that. Next up, we had Rowdy Roddy Piper versus Bad News Brown. And oh no, this is the match where Roddy Piper had half of his body painted black. And this was just not in good taste. Oh, it was so cringeworthy. I mean, I guess things were more acceptable back then, but this would not go over well at all today. Uh, I love you, Roddy, but whose idea was this? And I don't know why they were pushing Bad News Brown so hard back then. He was so bland. And he just wasn't that good in the ring. And, nothing about him just screams top level star to me. I don't know. This ends in a double count out finish. The two just keep brawling, and they brawl on the outside and double count out, and they just keep brawling after the match. I mean, I can't with any good conscience give this anything but a rotten. Just the overall angle wasn't good. The brawling was all right, but I can't condone this. Sorry, Roddy. Next up, we had the Hart Foundation versus the Bolsheviks, which is Nikolai Volkov and Boris Zukov. And I'm noticing there's a lot less managers so far this WrestleMania. We're actually like moving past the manager era of the, you see managers in almost every single match in the 80s. And here we are. So far, there's only been maybe like two managers. And we're like 5 or 6 matches in. And when they're singing the Russian national anthem, you could tell that Boris Zukov is just lip syncing poorly. He has no idea. Either maybe he couldn't hear it well, or he just doesn't know the words. He just was doing a terrible job of lip syncing. This wasn't really much of a match. The Hart Foundation hit the heart attack and pinned Zukov for the win in like probably 10 or 15 seconds. This was really short. And you know what? I was okay with it. It gave the Hart Foundation a dominant win in Canada. And, they looked really good. And, they're baby faces coming up. So I'm okay with this, It doesn't bother me at all. I don't know. Sometimes squashes are alright in my book. Next up, we had the Barbarian with Bobby the Brain Heenan versus Tito Santana. And man, Tito's been a staple at every one of these WrestleManias. This one had a pretty solid pace throughout. It was okay overall. It was kind of sloppy at times, but, I blame that a lot more on the Barbarian than Tito, of course. And actually, the Barbarian wins with a really cool diving clothesline off the top rope. That kind of stuff you didn't really see much back then. So it was a pretty cool finisher. And, this was okay. It's alright. Next up, we had the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes, and Sapphire versus Macho Man Randy Savage. And was he Macho King? He was actually Macho King Randy Savage at this point, with the Sensational Queen Sherry. And Dusty actually brought out Miss Elizabeth to kind of mess with Randy and be in their corner, be in Dusty and Sapphire's corner. And according to Howard Finkel, this was the first mixed tag team match in WWF history. So that's kind of cool. And I mean, obviously you see it every now and then now, but I guess this was the first, and good for them. I have to say, Sapphire is absolutely terrible. She obviously is not a wrestler in any way and should not have been a part of this match, but she was. But you know what? This was actually fun. Sherry, I can't tell you how hard Sherry works. She's not afraid to take big bumps. I never really appreciated her too much. I guess I just didn't see enough of her work. I really, really appreciate Sherry after this. And God, I love Macho. He's so good in every way. He's just one of the most perfect overall wrestlers in history. And you know what? This is just really fun overall. I enjoyed this. And the baby faces get the win when Elizabeth kind of pushes Sherry, and Sherry trips over Sapphire, who's like bending over behind her, and then Sapphire rolls her up for the 3, and the baby faces celebrate. And you cut backstage to Sherry and Macho just going nuts and really upset about their loss. But you know what? This was good stuff. I didn't think this sounded really great on paper because of, obviously a non wrestler, and I didn't know how well Sherry would do, but she really stood out. She and Macho like worked overtime to make this good. And you know what? I'm gonna give this a glorious. I enjoyed this a lot. I didn't think I would. Next, we had the Orient Express, uh, Tanaka and Sato with Mr. Fuji versus the Rockers. And man, this was really fun. This was a really, definitely a sprint of a match. Really great pacing. Um, all four guys are doing some really great stuff here, really innovative stuff. And there was a spot where Jannetty like got backdropped and landed on his feet, and it was awesome. You see stuff like that nowadays, but still, it caught me, and I was like, wow! Like I literally said out loud, that was awesome. Like when I saw it, and I really enjoyed this. It actually had a count out finish when Sato threw Jannetty threw salt in Jannetty's eyes, and Jannetty fell over the guardrail and got counted out. But still, that didn't take away from this. This was really fun. One of the better WrestleMania matches I've seen overall, I think. So definitely glorious for me. I wish this could have gone a few minutes longer and had a clean finish. But man, this was really good. Really good stuff. Next up, we had Dino Bravo with Jimmy Hart and Earthquake versus Hacksaw Jim Duggan. Hacksaw's USA gimmick does not work very well in Canada. He came out with the flag, and he got like a pretty mixed reaction actually. So I don't understand why they would even go with that if he's supposed to be the babyface here. And Dino Bravo is just like one of the most forgettable wrestlers I could think about. Like I don't even think about him. He's just there. I don't like him, but I don't dislike him, I guess, because he's just there. And you could say pretty much the same about this match. It was very forgettable, very much just there. Hacksaw wins with a 2x4 shot while the ref's distracted. And then after the bell, he gets beat up by Earthquake pretty bad. And they're really building Earthquake here. I mean, I guess he goes on to challenge for the title a few times, but they're really building him. And, yeah, this was just there. Next up, we had, for the $1 Million Championship, Jake the Snake Roberts versus $1 Million Man, Ted DiBiase, with Virgil. And they actually set this up at the previous WrestleMania. They actually were starting this feud then. So that's kind of interesting. And, this was pretty fun. It had a good pace throughout. And really strong psychology here. Something that kind of took me out of the match is the crowd randomly started the wave in the middle of the match. I don't know if they were bored or nowadays that's what the crowd does when they're bored or whatever, and they hijack the match. But they were super hot, and they were just doing the wave, and then they didn't get out of the match totally though, because they came right back. But it just kind of took me out of the match to see the crowd like that. I never like to see the crowd hijack. It always bothers me when I see it in the current product. So back then, it took me out of it a little bit. This ends in a countout finish when Virgil interferes, and DiBiase retains his $1 Million Championship. But then Jake attacks after the bell and hits him with the DDT. It stuffs money in his mouth, and then he takes the money and hands it out to people in the crowd. He goes for Damien, but it's a little too late. DiBiase's able to get out of there before he can use Damien on him. But this was fun. A couple more minutes. I wouldn't say a better crowd. A more attentive crowd that didn't distract. And this would have been something pretty special. And also a clean finish, would have been something pretty special. So, it was good, but not enough. Just a little bit short for me. Next up, we had the Big Boss Man versus Akeem the African Dream with Slick. And I don't know how this gimmick has lasted this long. It's been over a year at this point. How did they not just realize this was a terrible idea and drop it? I don't know. apparently this match was because like Ted DiBiase offered them money and Big Boss Man wouldn't take it, so he turned babyface because he wouldn't take the dirty money. And DiBiase actually attacks Boss Man before the bell, but then Boss Man just goes on and like destroys Akeem anyway and wins with a Boss Man slam. And this wasn't good. I didn't like anything about this, so this gets a rotten for me. No, not good action. Rotten. The story wasn't there. I don't know. Not for me. Oh man, this was something else. Rhythm and Blues came to the ring to perform their song Hunka 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 Honky Love. And man, this was bad. But like, so bad it's good almost. Honky was just so off time with the song. Greg Valentine didn't know the words at all. You had Jimmy Hart and the like backup singers are like really off key. It just sounded really bad. Oh, this was not a good idea. They actually came to the ring in like a pink Cadillac that was driven by DDP, so that's a fun fact. But this was so bad. I kind of actually enjoyed it though. And then the Bushwhackers ended up coming out and like destroying the guitars and chasing them away. So this was just a mess. Next up, we had the Ravishing Rick Rude with Bobby Heenan versus Superfly Jimmy Snuka. This was just like an overall fun sprint of a match. It was just kind of like a palate cleanser type thing, I guess. But it was kind of fun. And Rude wins with a Rude Awakening neck breaker just to get the clean, solid pin over a veteran like Snuka. And yeah, this was fine. It was fine for what it was. Okay, and finally the main event for the WWF and Intercontinental Championship. We have Hulk Hogan versus the Ultimate Warrior in the Ultimate Challenge, which was hyped up as the Ultimate Challenge, you know, throughout the entire night. Shoved down our throats, but this had a big fight feel, and it lived up. This is like the first babyface versus babyface main event in WrestleMania history. And I could see why they went with this. Both guys were really hot. You know, I mean, Hogan was, you know, the guy for the longest time. And Warrior was the heir apparent. And he just was really hot at this time. And the crowd was nuts for both of them. This was really, really good. Something you wouldn't expect from two guys who, you know, don't have the in-ring reputation of others, you know, like Macho or Steamboat, but these two actually worked really hard and made this work. There were some ref bumps, which, you know, both guys looked like they would have won throughout those. But, yeah. And, Hogan actually worked like the heel type role throughout this, which is kind of interesting because, you know, he's the ultimate babyface, and now he's working the heel role against the Warrior. And Warrior gets the win with the running splash, and Hulk Hogan is pinned clean in the center of the ring at WrestleMania. That's something that was hard to believe at that time, and it was really weird to see, but it was definitely the right decision in my opinion. Go with the hot hand in Warrior. And yeah, this was cool. This was actually like a changing of the guard. It was like a passing of the torch. Hogan raises Warrior's hand, hands him the belt, and I was afraid he was going to stay and celebrate with him too long, like he did with Macho at WrestleMania IV. But he didn't. He kind of just like raised his hand, gave him the seal of approval, and left. And then Warrior just celebrated with Pyro. This is the first appearance of like Pyro, pretty much too. And yeah, this was a good match, a good moment, definitely glorious. This was really strong main event, definitely. Overall, I enjoyed a lot of this WrestleMania. It's, you know, there were ups and downs, but this one was pretty good. There was a lot to like, and a lot of progress moving forward for the future. So, good stuff. Thank you guys so much for watching. Do not forget to like, comment, subscribe, follow us on Twitter at Deep Six Wrestling. Like us on Facebook, also at Deep Six Wrestling. And have a glorious day.